Rev up your engines! So your car's air conditioning doesn't work right. Believe it or not, there's a lot of stuff you can actually fix yourself, as I'm going to show you. With mechanics charging $100 to $150 an hour, there's a lot of stuff you can learn how to do yourself, and it's not as expensive as you might think. Now, let's say you're low on refrigerant. Yeah, you can get one of those little bottles at the auto parts store that you just added in. But in order to do that, you have to have a lot of experience and do a lot of research. Pressure gauges that come on those little bottles aren't as fancy as the gauge set I have here. They just have the low side pressure. You really need the low side pressure and the high side pressure to get a correct reading, and even then. See, on my phone, not only do you have to know the ambient temperature to see what the correct pressure should be, because it's affected by the ambient temperature outside, but also, you can see on the next page, you also need HR, the relative humidity. You gotta know the humidity to see what the pressure is gonna be. So filling your car with refrigerant, if you're going by pressure alone, it's a very complex task. But all AC systems have one thing in common that's exactly the same, regardless of the temperature or the humidity outside, so you don't need the stupid charts in the first place. So you got 480 grams. Now, if you take all the refrigerant out, all you have to do is put 480 grams back in, and the system is full exactly. You don't have to mess with the pressure. Now, as a professional mechanic, I got a big, expensive professional scale. I use a 30-pound canister of refrigerant. This works just as well. You can do it yourself for a fraction of the cost. I bought this postage scale just to prove it. Cost 20-something bucks. You turn it on, and it weighs grams. So you get your refrigerant can, you put it on a scale. In this case, it's 586 grams. You watch that scale, and when it goes down 480 grams, since this thing takes 480 grams, it's full. Now, unfortunately, you're gonna have to use more than one can in this, because this weighs the whole thing, the can, everything, and the refrigerant. The only thing that's coming out is the refrigerant. As you can see on the can, it's got 340 grams in it. This will lose 340 grams in it, right? You put that in. Then you get another can, and you put enough in so the total is 480. So the next can, if this one actually does have 340 grams, maybe it doesn't. We'll find out when it empties out, right? But if it really has 340 grams, that means you'd only add 140 grams from the next can, and you will have the right amount then. If you're near one of those auto parts stores, like I used to be in Houston, it was an AutoZone, they will loan you the gauges. They'll even loan you a vacuum pump to suck all the refrigerant out with. But if you aren't near one of those, don't feel sorry for yourself. This particular one came from a company called Auto Wanderer. This whole setup was 48 bucks. It'll last you a lifetime. If you're not a professional, you're going to use it once in a while unless you're going to do your friends. Maybe you'll turn into an AC technician, I don't know. But it works perfectly fine, and it was only 48 bucks. Now, the only thing you have to know is what kind of refrigerant you have. And the label again says, as you can see, it says HFC 134A. And as you can see, that's what's in this can. So this is the correct stuff. And this gauge setup is set up for 134A. Now, some of the newer cars use the new refrigerant. It's a bunch of BS. Oh, it doesn't ruin the ozone layer as much. The reason they made this was because it didn't ruin the ozone layer, but who knows? The new stuff is R1234YF. It's got a different name. It's a little bit different. It's also slightly flammable. So I like the old stuff. It's better. It doesn't go up in flames. But the new stuff uses different gauges. So before you do anything, you got to know which gauge set to get. But again, don't be worried, because that same company, Auto Wanderer, makes it for the 1234YF. There's the gauge set, and it was 49 bucks too. Don't worry about putting the wrong one on if you made a mistake, because the fittings only fit each one. They changed the fittings when they used to have R12 Freon. When they went to 134A, like in this Toyota, the fittings are different. They'll only fit on this system. And they did the same thing for the 1234YF refrigerant, the new one. It's got different fittings too, so you can't put them on wrong. And let's say you don't live near a place that'll rent you a vacuum pump. You can buy one. This is a solid metal one. I bought it on Amazon. It was like 60 bucks. Mechanics are charging you 100, 150 bucks an hour. Buy one. You can even use it on your house if you want to learn how to work on your house. Same system. I like this gauge set because it's better than the cheap ones that just have low side and high side. It's got vacuum and add refrigerant. So we go to the back vacuum line. Just hook the end up to the vacuum pump. You'll see it's real easy. You just unscrew the cap. and screw the vacuum line on. Then you get your low pressure line, which is the blue one, and hook it up to the low pressure line on the car. Now that's always the fat one. This is the low pressure line here, and you'll see that it snaps right on. There, snaps on tight. Then when you turn the vacuum pump on, you'll hear a pleasant hum. Then you go to the vacuum line and you open it up. Open this to the left, it even tells you open is that way. And as you're going to see, the vacuum gauge is going into a vacuum. You can see it's minus 30 pounds pressure. Now I started this car with an empty system. What I'm doing is I'm taking all the air out of the system because you can't have air. If you have air in your AC system, it'll screw the whole thing up. So you evacuate the system for say 45 minutes. And what it's doing, sounds strange, but it's making the water vapor in the system, if there is any, evaporate. A vacuum makes it evaporate, and the pump, you can hear it sucking, it's sucking it, and the water vapor comes out of the hole here. So I advise doing this for about 45 minutes to get all the crap out of the system so you know it's completely empty. Now you notice one thing, I didn't hook up the high side, because if you're filling up a system, you don't have to mess with the high side. Putting it on the low side will evacuate the whole system out if you wait 45 minutes, so there won't be anything left. And here's the problem with high sides, especially on older vehicles. The low side might only be 30, 40 pounds. The high side can get up to 300 when it's hot. And if you take the cap off and hook this gauge up, just because it's an old system, when you're done, odds are that high side's gonna start leaking. I've seen that working on cars for 53 years. Do not touch the high side unless you have to. Cause if you hook up both sides, when the high side gets taken off with that pressure, the valve, which has been sitting there for years, in this case, 15 years, now it's gonna start leaking, and all the leak you didn't have in the first place. So, leave the high side off, unless you're doing an analysis, which you really gotta have a lot of knowledge in. Let's say you fill your car with refrigerant and it still doesn't work right. Well, then you gotta hook up both gauges and do a bunch of analysis. It's relatively complex. But in this case, you're just adding refrigerant. You can leave the high side alone, suck it out of the low side, because the low side, like I say, is such low pressure. Generally, they won't leak. But sometimes when you're done and you take off the low side, put the cap back on, you put your finger in, it's hissing out. Yeah, you're gonna have to start all over and replace the valve because it wrecked the valve. But normally, that's a low pressure valve and it won't leak. So leave the high pressure valve alone if you're just adding refrigerant. After it's evacuated, you gotta add refrigerant, right? Now, there's two different kinds of cans you can buy. You're not gonna buy a 30-pound can, you need a license for that. But you can buy these small cans. If you get a fancy one like this, is a screw top. The screw top, there's the adapter that has the screw in it. You just screw it on, turn it down to break the seal, open it, and then the pressure will go in. Now, some of the cans don't have that screw. They're just an open can, kind of like an old beer can. Well, in that case, you use this adapter that screws in flush to the can. And it works the same way. You close it, and the little needle punches a hole. Then when you take it off, it doesn't. But you gotta find most cans are like this because by law, they don't want them to leak, so there's a little valve in here. So when you're done, this one won't leak. Where the older style ones, before they had beer top pops, when you had to have a can opener to open a beer when I was young, right? You're probably gonna find one of these. But don't worry about buying any parts, because the $49 set I just showed you, hey, it comes with all these adapters. Just make sure you get a kit like that that has all the adapters. Most of them are gonna have the screw-on one, so you're gonna use the one that screws on. It's an anti-pollution thing, they don't want to leak, so you buy the cans with the screw-on ones, you use this adapter. And again, I like this gauge set because it's got its own add refrigerant. It's turned off now. And you'll notice down here, that brass part screws off. You don't even want to get a little bit of air in the system. So once you open this can, the refrigerant comes through here, right into the gauge set. But you don't want to get air in the system. So once you open it up, you push the little valve. It's a bicycle valve. You push it a little, and then out comes the air just for a second. So you don't get any air in the system. Kind of amazing. $49, you get a set that has all this stuff on it. But that's all you need. You don't need anything fancier. Then with your refrigerant sitting on the scale, you start the car and turn on the AC. It's going to take all the refrigerant out of that can, which should be about 340 grams. When that's gone, you put another can on. And I always watch the cans because if you look, this one weighs a little different. It's 602. If you remember, the other one weighed 586 grams. They do not fill these cans that accurately. That's why you want to use a little scale. But what the heck? A little postage scale works fine. That thing weighs up to 50 pounds. So weighing a little thing like this is nothing. Doesn't strain it at all. Since you already put in 340, once 140 grams comes off, we just shut the valve off. We shut it off. And what do we have here? It's gone down to 42 degrees. That's nice and cold. It'll fluctuate a little here. Now it's 41, 42. That's nice and cold. Now you've actually done it like a pro. If you guess with a pressure gauge, like I say, you got to have a lot of knowledge. Who knows? Might not be perfect. There might be a slight flaw in the system and the pressures are going to look weird on the gauges and then you're going to be confused. In this case, you can't go wrong. You suck it all out. Then you fill it up with a factory load. Then you know it's got the perfect amount of refrigerant in it. I have had more people bring me cars. The only thing wrong was it didn't have the right amount of refrigerant. Either too little or too much. Too much is just as bad. It can blow the compressor up for too much pressure. Or you can have air in the system. This will get rid of all the simple problems and you can do it yourself easy like I just showed you. Even if you got to buy the tools. You know, you're going to spend maybe $100-something bucks. And when it came to the refrigerant, I just bought this at a local auto parts store. It was like 12 bucks. Simple to do. The other day, a guy came to me and said, Scotty, this guy wanted 500 bucks to fill my refrigerant system up. Don't waste money like that. You can easily do it yourself. AutoZone will loan you the equipment. Even better. Then all you got to buy is the can that costs 12 bucks. But still, even if you got to buy the equipment, hey, the guy told me they wanted 500 bucks. So instead, you spend 100 bucks on equipment and you spend 12 bucks on the refrigerant, you're still way ahead of the game. Plus, and this is a big plus, you can't trust mechanics these days. They want to sell you stuff. I've had more people come to me, a guy said I needed a compressor. I check it out. I do exactly what I did here. Then it works fine. A year later, they say it's still blowing cold. Unless you don't trust yourself, learn how to do it yourself. You can see it can be done. The stuff is readily available. The stickers on the car show you how much refrigerant to put in. Say yours fell off, you can look it up online to find out real easy. Simplest thing is to add refrigerant when it leaked out. They all leak to some extent. Now, air conditioning is just a heat pump. It sucks the hot air out of the cabin of your car, and then it blows that heat using the AC condenser in front of your car's radiator. The condenser is hidden in here in the front, and behind it is the radiator and the cooling fans that cool both the radiator and the air conditioning system. Now in modern cars, of course, it's all computer controlled, but it's still the same basic idea. The refrigerant is compressed by the compressor here. It's cool that a car thing's always, the name means what they actually do. And once the refrigerant is compressed, it goes through the lines into the condenser in the front where the heat is sucked away by the cooling fans in the radiator system. Then the high pressure refrigerant goes on the skinny little line into the evaporator inside the car. Here's an evaporator. When the high pressure gets into the evaporator, it expands, and as it does, it sucks in the heat from inside your car where you're hot. Now this big tube here, it's connected to the evaporator inside the vehicle, and it takes the refrigerant out and sucks it back into the compressor down here, and the compressor in an endless cycle then compresses it again. It goes through the condenser where it gives off a lot of heat and then goes back into the evaporator. So it's basically an endless cycle of compressing refrigerant, then heat gets sucked out in the front of the car, then that refrigerant goes inside the dash where it expands in the evaporator and it sucks the heat out of the car, then it compresses that again and goes back to the condenser, which gets rid of the heat. It just keeps sucking heat out of the car. Now, when made correctly, they're very reliable systems, but there are things that you need to check before summer gets hot and it doesn't work. And the first thing is, make sure your cooling fans on your radiator are both working fine, because if they don't suck all that air through there, the engine can overheat, the pressure can get too high in the compressor system. You're going to make sure both fans work, so test them like this. Turn the AC on full blast and let it run a few minutes. You want to make sure that both of those cooling fans are coming on and off. They won't stay on the whole time, but you want to make sure they both work and blow good. You can see this one's blowing good, and over here, this one's blowing good too. And I've had many customers over the years say, my AC doesn't seem to be blowing cold enough. And I checked, and what was happening was, maybe one of the fans was blowing, but the other one wasn't. So it didn't get enough airflow. You got to make sure that they're both working fine and blowing a lot of air when it gets hot outside. Now the next thing to check is the cabin air filter. Believe it or not, many modern cars inside the glove box have a filter for the AC system. You don't have to fiddle with the glove box, this one's plastic, so it's real easy. Out it comes, and inside this little panel, you take it off. Voila, there's a filter. And this car is parked under a tree, so I got one of these reusable ones. You can see there's a lot of crud coming out of it. You can hose it down and clean it out and use it over many times. And you wouldn't believe how many times I'd have a customer come to me and say, oh, my AC is really working poorly. And what happened was, this thing had been on there for 3 or 4 years. It had never been touched. It was full of crud, and hardly any air was getting sucked over the evaporator. So check your cabin air filter if you have one. And if you're like me and park under a tree, clean it all the time. And when you're done, the cover just snaps right over and you snap the glove box back in. And this is one of the few times I like plastic, because you can just bend it by your hand and snap it back in place. You don't need a bunch of tools to take the stupid thing apart with. Now the next thing to check, as nutty as it sounds, is the car's battery. And here's why. Now this Lexus may be 17 years old, but everything's computer controlled, even on the AC system. So, if you don't have the correct voltage coming in from the battery, you're doing really strange things and not blowing really cold air. You want to have your battery load tested just to make sure it's still good. Takes less than a minute to hook it up and run the test. In this case, it says replace battery because it's too weak. And it makes total sense, because my wife said, gee, the AC doesn't seem to be blowing as cold as it used to. Well, it wasn't getting enough power. I'll just change the battery. Now, all cars lose a little bit of refrigerant as time goes on because they have a compressor that has a shaft and there's a rubber seal. The rubber seal has to leak a little so that the oil inside can lubricate the seal. If the seal ran dry, it would burn out really fast. So they all leak a little bit, but they all eventually run out. A professional uses gauges to see if it needs more refrigerant, but here's a good check. If you find that the passenger side is getting reasonably cool, but you go over to the driver's side and it's not as cold, that often means you're low on refrigerant. Because in this case, the evaporator's inside here. So this side gets to the evaporator first. So the coolest air will come out here, and then when it gets to the other side, it won't be quite as cool. So the air blowing over here won't be as cold as it is on the passenger side. That's often a sign that you need refrigerant added to your system. Now, if you have a set of AC gauges and how to use them, go ahead and add your own refrigerant. But please, don't go buy one of those little cans at the store and start adding it on a guess, because modern systems, they can be off even half an ounce, and they're going to have problems if you put too little or too much. You can destroy a system. So don't just willy-nilly decide, oh, I'm going to try to put some refrigerant in. You can do some serious damage that way. And really, if you want to mess around with this stuff yourself, heck, you can get a set of decent gauges for 50, 60 bucks. Now, the last thing you can check is the condenser itself. Now, this is really handy because on this matrix, the condenser's open. As soon as you open the hood, there it is. If it gets covered in bugs, you can clean it off with a little water, hydrate them, and then squirt them off, and then you're going to have a much more efficient condenser. And heck, since the condenser is in front of the radiator, it's the first thing in a car to get bugs and mud and crud. And sometimes I've seen plastic bags stuck in them. Most cars aren't open like this when you open the hood. Many of them are hidden behind grills and stuff, and you can't see in that well. So get a flashlight, look around. If you see an old garbage bag stuck in there or a bunch of bugs, get it out of the way, because if you lower that airflow, your AC goes whoop, the pressures go too high and it's not going to work right. Now, of course, if you can find a leak in an AC system, it's obvious, you can hear it hissing or dye comes out. My advice is, first, attempt to fix it mechanically. To give an example of another leaking system, but one that has less pressure, let's say you get a hole in your tire. Some people use that Fix-A-Flat. Now, if you had a nail or a tiny hole, the stuff actually can seal the leak. Sealers can work for small leaks, not big ones. Now, my advice is, before you use any of the sealers, make sure the compressor is working and isn't making horrible noises. If you turn it on, it's going clacka, clacka, clacka. The compressor's shot and you're gonna have to replace it. Then start up the car and turn the AC on, full blast, then go under the hood. Make sure that the cooling fans are working. This one has one here and one here. They're blowing perfectly fine. Look at the compressor. This one's quiet. It's not making any weird noises. Now, in the case of this Acura, it's leaking it out after a month and a half. So, it's a small leak. And when I checked it for leaks with my sniffer, Lo and behold, it was leaking inside the dash. And I know a lot of mechanics are going to say, oh, don't ever use that stuff, it'll clog your system, but look, they give true directions here. It says, will not clog up AC system or service port when used as directed. So you do exactly as they say. This isn't a miracle in a can that's going to fix other problems. It will only fix small leaks. And to give it the best chance of working, here's what I do. If you don't have the equipment, pay a mechanic to do it for you, because you really have to do it this way if you want it to have the best chance of sealing any small leak in your AC. First, you have to hook up a set of gauges. Put on the low side. Then you have to evacuate the system to get anything out. And in most places by law, you have to have a recycling machine. If there is refrigerant left in the system, you got to hook this up to a recycling machine so you don't send the refrigerant into the atmosphere. But of course, if it's completely empty, then you can just hook this up to a vacuum pump and just suck it out to get everything out so there's a complete vacuum in the system. Now, this is a really important step in putting in any sealer. To do it correctly, you got to empty the system out. Then you put the sealer in, which is easy enough. Can's got a little clip that goes right on. You just take this line off and put this on. Then you just turn the can upside down and spray it in, pushing the button. And of course, you do this with the engine running and the AC on. And once the can's empty, and you can tell that by listening, put your ear on the can, and when it starts hearing a sucking sound, you know it's hollow and dry inside. And then once the can is in, you fill it up with a full load of refrigerant. And it's very important that as soon as the can's empty, you fill it up with refrigerant. You want it flowing through the system. Then my advice is, let it sit and idle with all the fans running for about half an hour. That way it flows through the system and has the best chance of sealing it. Now, I know a lot of mechanics are going to go berserk and say, oh, don't ever use that stuff, it'll destroy this or that. Well, the system has to have a slow leak. It does have to leak out in 2 weeks or longer. If you got to fill it up every hour or after a day or two, this stuff's not going to work. The leak would be too big. We're talking about a small leak here. And as I said, it's not a miracle in a can. It's not going to fix a broken AC system that's got some other problem like a expansion valve or a compressor or the fans aren't working right. It's only going to fix small leaks. Now, over the years, I've tried lots of different ones. And unfortunately, luckily they were old junky cars that the customer said, well, we'll give it a try because we're not going to put much money into the car. Some of the other ones actually did clog up systems and the compressors locked up. But this AC Pro one, it's the only one that I will try anymore. But you do have to go through all these steps that I've shown. You can't just think, oh, I'll just shoot this stuff in and drive around and see if it helps. And as I said, if your system makes horrible noises when it's running, don't even try this stuff. That means that at a minimum, the compressor's starting to wear out. You need some serious work, and this little $29 can is not going to fix your problem. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.